So there he is, a physician, an entrepreneur, a business owner, an inventor, and he's working on oncologic diseases and delivery of chemotherapy to the tumor without the same toxicity, and also alkalinizing the center of the tumor. And lo and behold,
I got cancer.
He got cancer.
Found out the chemo regimen I was going to be on. They happened to be drugs that we had studied in combination with our drug. And I told my doc, I mean, he was familiar with our work at Moffitt, and I said, I know the 3 drugs you're going to put me on. And I was on old chemotherapy drugs, doxorubicin and cisplatin and cyclophosphamide. But I knew I could, at least in mice, I made all those drugs. When I say I mean our drug made all those drugs much more efficient, like 2 to 3x more efficient at penetrating into the tumor. So I said, I want to take advantage of this technology. And he said, you know, it's up to you. Obviously, he can't recommend it, but he said, if you want to self-administer, I'm supportive. So I did, and I had an incredible response. I'm here today.
Many of you have probably seen The Technology of Beauty. Those that haven't, I encourage you to check it out. It's a podcast. It's on YouTube and various other feeds where I have the opportunity to interview the movers and shakers of the beauty business. And folks, this morning is no exception. Today I have the opportunity to interview my dear friend Ryan Beal, who's going to share some very interesting new data with us. Hopefully I can pull out a few things from him. But first, I'd like you to get to know Ryan a little bit. So welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Grant.
You've been
It's
through
great
this
to be here.
before with me. You're
I
just
have.
sitting in my living room, and we're just chatting.
I like it.
And we have some voyeurs. In any event, where are you from?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Colorado, Greeley, Colorado,
Yep.
and still consider that home.
And where'd you go to school?
After leaving Colorado, I went out to the Northeast, did my undergraduate work at Dartmouth, which was wonderful. I love Dartmouth. And then did medical school down at University of Pennsylvania.
So you're a physician.
I am, although I've spent my entire career on the industry side of medicine. So while at medical school, I got interested in the business side of medicine, started thinking about how I was going to make that happen, thought about doing a joint degree at Wharton. Long story short, I ended up at McKinsey for what I thought would be a couple years, and then I'd go back to medicine. Ended up a couple years, came and went a couple times, and I was there about 7 years. Had a great experience and left about 18 years ago, and just been on an entrepreneurial journey since then.
What did you do after being at McKinsey? What was your first soiree into business?
My first foray into business was in the aesthetic space with some partners. Built out a group of aesthetic practices, essentially derm aesthetics practices, and that morphed into a lot of things in the aesthetic space. Online retail skincare business, which is still up and running today, turned into essentially a cooperative of plastic surgeons and dermatologists that shared medical equipment, and then ultimately turned into Dive.
But it wasn't Dive initially.
It wasn't Dive
For
initially.
those who follow you. What was it first called? Excuse me.
Well, originally, Dive, when Dive started, it was called Intellectual Property Associates. And it started because through one of my other businesses, I met an ophthalmic surgeon who had some interesting IP around skin delivery and skin penetration. And essentially, we put an investment group together and bought up a bunch of patents. And so it was called Intellectual Property Associates. And then that transformed into Ampersand. And then as we really started seeing that we were on to something more than just a skincare company, which is what we were initially really excited about, we were seeing delivery into the bloodstream for certain actives, and that got us quite excited and really changed the trajectory of the company, and that's when we became Dive.
Could you go back and once again explain sort of the concept of this transcutaneous delivery and maybe touch on the xylocaines or the canes that you were doing, and then the PKs and how it was expressed in the bloodstream and excreted.
Yeah.
So touch on that, because it's going to lead us right to the next part. And I want everyone to be crystal clear. We're talking about putting something on your skin and having it be entirely absorbed into your bloodstream. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, when we got started, originally I thought I was going to be building a skincare business, and was quite excited about that. Nice little business, would kind of be part of my little healthcare portfolio. And one of the products we started developing early on was a topical lidocaine. And I knew from my experience in the aesthetic space that a lot of device-based procedures are uncomfortable, but that depth of discomfort is beyond the surface of the skin. We were very focused at the time on oral therapy and the pain being driven, 4.5 millimeters deep. So we were thinking, well, what if we could get an analgesic down to that level? And worked quite well, worked quickly. As we started doing PK studies, in other words, testing to see what the concentration of the drug was in the skin, we realized that we were seeing very high levels of lidocaine in the blood, which in this case you don't want. And that really changed the trajectory of the company, where we said, this is more than just surface of the skin or a few millimeters within the skin. We're getting things into the blood in an unexpected way. And that really was a big fork in the road for us.
Can you then go on to the bicarb experience, and in particular the long-distance bike riders up in the hills over by the up in LA,
Yeah.
Tell them that story.
So those of you that know me know I have been, or previously was, a pretty competitive age grouper, amateur triathlete and marathoner. And on the heels of some of this data on lidocaine, I was in the midst of training for a marathon and thought, well, what if I could, for those of you into endurance sports, fueling is one of the biggest challenges. You can only take in so much fuel by mouth while you're exerting yourself, because all your blood's out in the limbs. And I thought, well, what if I could supplement my goo intake by just driving some nutrients through the skin? And literally, you talk about from lab to liquidity. I'll back up before the lab. This is at my kitchen table. But I started thinking, what if I could put something together that would augment my nutrition and help my athletic performance? And ultimately where that ended up is buffering lactic acid and driving sodium bicarbonate through the skin. And there at my kitchen table, I was doing forearm contractions and with a rubber band. And my mom thought I was crazy. She was visiting in town. What's going on? But I realized that I was buffering that lactic acid in one side. That was the first test. We tested it much more beyond that, including at academic medical centers. But long story short, it worked. And so that transformed into, today it's a spin-out company of ours. It's Momentous. They have a number of different supplements, but one of them is a topical buffering agent called PR Lotion. It's used by a bunch of the Peloton and the Tour de France, a lot of the NFL teams,
National
NBA,
Hockey League,
Hockey
the
League.
NBA, the NFL.
This
It's
silly
approved.
stuff works.
The Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
So putting bicarb on the top of your skin and your thighs don't burn as much. You can pick it up. You licensed it, right? You're not actually commercial.
Yep. So we spun it out, licensed it. But yeah, it does all those things. And the real benefit to the elite athletes is it helps with their recovery because they're not as sore. They don't have that delayed onset muscle soreness. But that's kind of how it got started, the first
So that's the
product
proof
we
of concept.
commercialized. That was a proof of concept.
So take us to the next step.
Well, the next step was around the time I was seeing these results. There were some similar studies going on in oncology, and I'll come back to aesthetics because I know that's why we're
But I
here.
want you to tell the oncologic story.
Yeah, so on the oncology side, there was a group out of University of Arizona and the Moffitt Cancer Center that were looking at buffering agents, bicarb in particular, taken orally by animals to buffer the acidity of the tumor microenvironment. And they were seeing some really landmark data in animals. And it had just progressed to human studies. This was 2015, 2016, and failed. And it failed because the women this is a breast cancer study, highly motivated group of patients, they couldn't ingest the required doses orally, all kinds of adverse events. So they failed to even enroll the study. Well, this was about the same time, a bunch of riders in the Peloton in France are using our topical for lactic acidosis. So, long story short, I called up the team at University of Arizona. They had just failed the study and said, you have any interest in keeping the study alive? We think we've got a workaround. We want to do the same thing. we've got good data on muscles, and we've shown that we can buffer muscles, but what if we could actually buffer the tumor microenvironment? You know, tumors are highly acidic. They create and thrive in an acidic environment. But the other big challenge is that acidic halo around a tumor makes it very hard for other drugs, immunotherapies and chemotherapies, to have their real effect. So it's a very powerful potentiator, and they were excited to have a workaround. So we started what's become a very long-term collaboration with the team is all at Moffitt Cancer Center now, and we've kept their research alive and merged it with ours, and planning to head into human trials this year.
Okay. Is it time?
Sure.
Okay. So there he is, a physician, an entrepreneur, a business owner, an inventor, and he's working on oncologic diseases and delivery of chemotherapy to the tumor without the same toxicity, and also alkalinizing the center of the tumor. And lo and behold,
I got cancer.
He got cancer.
So that's
Not
why,
just
that's why I don't
cancer.
have hair.
Yeah.
I mean, I can grow my hair now, but I've kept it off.
So why don't you share your story? You told me I could bring it up. I think it's incredibly impressive what
Yeah,
happened.
so it kind of started at AIS 2 years ago, 2023. I presented here as part of the Shark Tank, I think. Mm-hmm. And anyway, the last slide is kind of a teaser. I was very focused on what we're doing in adipolysis, which we'll talk about as well. But the last slide of my presentation, I always put a little plug in for cancer. Anyway, about 2 months later, I was running an ultramarathon in Colorado. It was a 6-day, 120-mile race, and had a little chest pain. And it was different, and I didn't know what it was, but of course, you know what I was worried about. I didn't want to die on the trail at 12,000 feet in Colorado. So dropped out of the race on day 3, went to the Vail ER, and the emergency room, doc comes back. And he says, well, I've got good news, bad news. So the good news is your heart looks fantastic. I said, well, okay, great. And he said, the bad news is you have a mass in the middle of your chest and a couple of your lymph nodes. It's consistent with a malignancy. You've got to get that worked up. So that's kind of how it started. And didn't know what it was at first. Ended up being a rare tumor. I had a high-grade thymoma, for those of you that know, but anterior mediastinal mass that migrated or spread to a couple lymph nodes. But I got on the phone with my buddies at Moffitt, and when you're in that moment, I called you too. I was from the ICU in Vail, and you leverage your network, and ultimately ended up getting connected through my friends at Moffitt Cancer Center to a great team at Cedars. And once we got it diagnosed, my doc settled on our chemotherapy regimen. I knew I was going to lose my hair, so I shaved it, and then it just kept the look. But found out the chemo regimen I was going to be on. They happened to be drugs that we had studied in combination with our drug. And I told my doc, he was familiar with our work at Moffitt, and I said, I know the 3 drugs you're going to put me on. And I was on old chemotherapy drugs, doxorubicin and cisplatin and cyclophosphamide. But I knew I could, at least in mice, I made all those drugs. When I say I mean our drug made all those drugs much more efficient, like 2 to 3x more efficient at penetrating into the tumor. So I said, I want to take advantage of this technology. And he said, it's up to you. Obviously, he can't recommend it, but he said, if you want to self-administer, I'm supportive. So I did, and I had an incredible response. I'm here today.
Like the 99th percentile response.
Yeah.
And his oncologists are blown away.
Yeah, I was originally slated for 6 rounds of chemo, ended up having 2.
And the tumor's gone.
And yeah, now the tumor's gone. The tumor, after 2 months, was 70% smaller. My lymph nodes were clear, and then I was ready for surgery. I had a pretty in-depth surgery about a year ago, and then radiation therapy, and just completed radiation therapy last fall.
And it's funny, you floated the idea to us 2 years ago at this
Yeah,
point. And then you
that's how I end all the presentations.
didn't have to demonstrate it to us. Okay, so back to aesthetics. You just mentioned something, one way you're using it.
Yeah.
How much of that can you tell us? And then we're going to get to neurotoxins. I want to know how much you can share with us. Let's
Yeah.
start with the fat.
Yeah, I can share quite a bit. I mean, our core technology and science, I mean, we're formulation chemistry experts with a real expertise in epithelial biology. And so our goal is we know we can get things through the skin and into the body. That doesn't mean we should be doing it with everything, but it's to look for those opportunities where there's a known active that has proven efficacy, but has some delivery challenge. And in this case, for adipolysis, we're using a version, basically topical mesotherapy. So a version of sodium deoxycholate topically, with the overall kind of ingoing hypothesis that, or context being, we know it works, but we also know when it's injected in a bolus form, it has a pretty onerous adverse event profile, and consequently has not been had a great uptake in the market, clinically or commercially. And we looked at that and said, well, what if instead of that bolus injection once a month and the associated adverse event profile, could we do something topically that doesn't have that adverse event profile, but still has the efficacy profile, kind of a slow and steady approach. And so that's what we've done. We've studied it in flanks, and most recently, the new data we were talking about is in submental fat. And we're quite excited about what we're seeing. The punchline is we're seeing results with the topical that it's early days, small studies, but arguably exceed what you see with injectable and even device-based approaches. But it's a BID topical, twice a day, morning and night topical with no adverse events. And just reflecting on what Laura was just presenting on the state of the market, I had a couple takeaways. One, I want to get to those revenues. That's the most important thing. But the other, just in terms of how patients are seeing the world and understanding that treatment journey. We think there's a real gap in that patient journey today, from skincare to some of the less invasive options like injectables or devices. There's this opportunity for very active topicals in that treatment journey. So that's where we're focused with the adipolysis.
And the other nice thing about it, you're eliminating the injections, and thus you're eliminating the pain. And pain, in every single study we do, pain is either number one or number two deterrent.
Yeah.
For any of these things we do.
Yeah.
Pain comes up as one or two in every single focus group.
Yeah.
So-
And we hear the same thing from patients that have been in our studies. We think there's a real opportunity for those patients that are early on in that treatment journey, those entry patients that are thinking, I want to do something for this, or I've got a targeted area that bothers me, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for X, Y, or Z. We'll send them out the door with a topical, get them started on that journey.
And the nice thing, it is localized, and so the recalcitrant areas, in spite of massive weight loss with the pharmacologic interventions, there are still recalcitrant bulges.
Yep.
Males and females have different areas, but targeted reduction of fat through a transcutaneous, non-injection based, not with minimal or no discomfort, really.
Yeah.
So having said that, let's go to neurotoxins.
Okay. I want to say one more thing on adipolysis.
Okay, yeah, please.
Just real quick, because I understand the skepticism with a topical fat cream. And so I just want to
Yeah.
put a little bow around from what we saw from a data perspective. What we're seeing, we studied it first in histology and looking at lipomas, and then in flank fat, submental fat. But essentially what you see is in the submentum anyway, about a cc reduction in volume per week. And so we studied it over 12 weeks. We saw just over an 11 cc volume reduction, which aesthetically is very, it's a grade or two level improvement. And we think with continued use, you'll see even more. So anyway, just wanted to
How
tie it
far
all around.
along are you in terms of getting FDA approval and so forth? Where are you at this point?
Well, so
You're not doing mice.
yeah, no, in this case, obviously, it's humans.
Yeah.
For adipolysis, we're in the process of looking for a commercial partner. So we're in the middle of that process, talking to a number of the people here already, and happy to talk to more. I think there's a few different directions this product could go from a FDA perspective. Our instinct is to to go the full FDA approval path and be able to take advantage of the claims associated with that. And so it's a pivotal trial away from approval.
Okay.
But we're looking for a partner that ultimately would be the commercial channel for that.
How much money do you need to do the final study?
Well, I'll leave that up to the partner discussions. Depends how big. It's not a lot. I mean, I'm coming, I'm benchmarking against the world of oncology, so studying submental fat with a topical is nothing compared to running an oncology trial. Yeah, so it's small, and we think it's a huge opportunity. So,
Okay, now, we all know how popular the toxins are. You saw Laura's talk, it still was
Yep.
number one.
Yep,
Biggest deterrent? Pain,
yep.
or looking weird. Cost doesn't seem to be a factor. I mean, it's number three in many, but pain. Nobody really wants needles stuck in their face. That's why if you can get twice a year presentation like Revance can do with Daxxify versus 4 times with Botox, I mean, who wouldn't go twice? I mean, who wants needles in their face 4 times a year when they can do it twice a year? What are you doing to move the toxins across the skin? That's actually how Daxxify even started, right?
Yeah.
Initially, Dan Brown had the idea with Nikki here and others. Why can't we put a protein with it and drive it across the skin? Are you trying to do this now with your Dive product?
Yes. In fact, that's the other slide I always end with in my presentations. I have 2 moonshot slides, and one is toxins, and then I finish with oncology. We think it's doable. We're seeing a signal with it. We think if anyone can crack the code, we can. It's not to minimize the challenge of getting a toxin across the skin. I mean, for us, for anybody, it's a huge molecule, but certainly when you talk about breaching the skin's barrier, it's a big challenge, but it's one we relish and are quite excited about because it also is an incredible proof of principle for us as we do it. Just, we think molecular weight largely will be our biggest constraint when taking molecules through the skin. But if you can get 450 kilodalton or 900 kilodalton toxin across the skin, all of a sudden antibodies look easy and it opens up a huge opportunity. So we've looked at a number of different toxins. We're working with a few undisclosed manufacturers on taking it topically, and we've done work on our own. And like I said, we've seen a signal. We've started with hyperhidrosis signal, just mimicking some of the early work done by Dan Brown and his group as well. But then we'll go from there into targeting the neuromuscular junction and some of the more aesthetic indications of the face. The nice thing about Botox too is they're kind of multiple shots on goal or multiple levels of success. Obviously the neuromuscular junction being the big one, if you could solve that, but you also back up from there and you've got skin quality and a number of other more superficial potential applications.
So early on, when Dan and the people at Revance, it wasn't called Revance, started the studies with the peptides added to the neurotoxin, there were 20-some sites, and the FDA wanted a 2-point improvement, and there were some sites that showed 2-point improvements. It was not approved ultimately, but all the sites showed some improvement when they were doing the topical transcutaneous delivery of the toxin with the peptide.
Yep.
So if you add your delivery system to that, I don't know if you can tell us if you've done that with Daxxify, but it seems to me, since there's already been some success with transcutaneous delivery with a topical rather than an injection, I would think you would want to couple with them, if you could. Jeff, can he? No, just kidding. If you could, and see if you could move it across the skin.
I agree.
I bet. Okay. So exciting stuff.
Thank you.
What other moonshots might you have before we conclude this?
Well, the big next step for us, I mean, we have 2 real priorities, especially as I'm kind of merging back into the business after the last 18 months. My 2 priorities over the rest of this year and next year from a business operations perspective is, 1, I want to find a commercial partner for what we call DYV350, but that's our adipolysis drug. And two, I want successful human data in oncology. We're going after melanoma, non-melanoma skin cancers, and some other cutaneous cancers. But that's where I'm focused. Those would be my and the company's kind of near-term moonshots, not technological moonshots, but business milestone objectives for the next year. So it's a commercial partner on the aesthetic side for adipolysis and human data on the oncology side. And really, where we're headed to is ultimately, putting ourselves in a position for a transaction sometime in 2026. Our default path is to take the company public. I know that the title is Road to an IPO or From Lab to Liquidity. I view it as liquidity is always nice for the investors and giving them that option. From my seat, it's also it's a capitalization strategy. And so as we continue to build out the clinical products and advance them in the clinical stages, you need capital, and you need a lot of capital, especially as you're looking at oncology. And so the path to IPO is as much a liquidity opportunity for investors, but more so for the company, it's a capitalization strategy. It's access to capital.
Would you be open to splitting it? Would you be open to segmenting aesthetics versus oncology, for instance? Because this is an audience that's primarily aesthetics. Would you be interested in that sort of deal?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things we've talked about quite a bit as a company, and we're a unique company in that we've got an aesthetics portfolio and then an oncology and immunology portfolio. That's a kind of
And a performance portfolio.
Yeah.
Portfolio also.
Yeah. So it's a very unique story for the street. And so we are looking at creating and spinning off, an aesthetics business versus kind of the therapeutics business. And I think it makes a lot of sense for the company and for investors.
Maybe we should have had him on Shark Tank. Thank you very much, Ryan. It's been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure, and we wish you nothing but the very best.
It's great to be
on
here.
all three of those areas.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.